So you want to get a 40 plus in VCE English Language. Well, here's how you do it. In this video, I'm going to walk through the unbeatable method for informal analytical commentaries. And really that's because we can predict what's going to show up on our transcripts. So you shouldn't be walking into your SACs or exams blind. If you were to ask me or any of the 10 top 1% scoring tutors on the Eng Lang Pro team, none of them would say that they walked into the exam not knowing what they were going to write on every single section of the exam, including short answer and analytical commentary, right? And why is that? Well, if it's your first time here, welcome. My name is Sepanta. I'm one of the tutors on the Eng Lang Pro team. We all scored in the top 1%, and our mission is to, one, help you excel in the subject by breaking everything down into very easily digestible, templates and formulas to really help you become an excellent communicator, both in the real world and to also help you get that study score and that ATAR that you're going for. So let's get right into it. Now, it's very important to keep in mind that there are some features that you are almost guaranteed to come across, right? It's very, very unlikely that you don't come across these features. And why is that, right? I want you to think about, ACs and SAQs and the transcripts that they give you. Well, let's say it's a spoken informal AC. Well, think about the fact that prosodics have to be there. They have to be present, which means symbols like slashes, whether it be up or down or up, or underlines for emphasis or emphatic stress, or little less than signs with the letter A or the letter F, right? Which could, denote tempo or volume, whether it be, with the letter P for piano, or whether it be for legato with the letter L. So with all these symbols present, right, you must know how to analyze prosodic features, right? They are guaranteed. They're guaranteed to show up in any formal transcript. Sorry, in any spoken transcript, informal or formal, right? Keep that in mind. And so think about it, right? Use your logic to analyze. So even if you haven't memorized what, falling pitch does, right? Think about why someone might suddenly talk in a deeper voice, at a deeper pitch, or end a sentence on a deeper note, right? On a lower note. Well, that could be because, falling pitch could indicate, seriousness, right? It could indicate that you're finished speaking or your idea has come to an end, right? So what does that mean? It means you're passing the floor, right? Etc. So what about things like rising pitch? Well, rising pitch could indicate a questioning, a questioning tone. Like, maybe I'm confused, so I go up in pitch. Did you see how I just went up in pitch? And it could indicate uncertainty, right? It could indicate excitement, right? So analyze the context of what is happening in that specific transcript, right? The same could go for all these other features. Emphatic stress every single time is, by design, is going to reinforce whatever that word is, whether it be to draw the attention of the audience to that word. Well, figure out the reason why and tell me. Or further to that, maybe, just maybe, it's to reinforce memorability of that word or phrase with emphatic stress, right? And maybe it's because they're trying to sell a product or whatnot. So use your logic and your intuition. That's very, very important. Now, if it's going to be informal and spoken, right, laughter could be likely present, right? If it's very informal, and what might that do? Close social distance. It can build rapport, right? It can have a phatic function, right? So start linking these ideas to functions, which are functions of what? Referential, conative, phatic, metalinguistic, poetic, and emotive, right? We have 6, right? Or your social purposes, or start linking everything to social purposes as practice, right? Whether it be, upholstering or supporting social harmony, right? Supporting in-group membership, right? Social distance adjustments, right? Politeness markers and strategies, right? So, positive politeness or negative politeness, right? Let's think about these concepts. Now, further to that, right, I just want you to notice that I'm moving in the order of the subsystems. So the subsystems in English language are what? Let's come back to the top here, right? Our subsystems, right? Kind of a broad categorization. We have phonetics and phonology. We have morphology and lexicology, the study of words and the makeup of individual words. Phonetics and phonology is the study of sounds. Then we have our syntax. Then we have discourse. And then we have our semantics, just broadly separated. And you could argue pragmatics is also one, right? So phonetics and phonology, if it's spoken, will always be present. So you better know it inside out. You should know all of this inside out, depending on how well you want to perform, right? So next, let's go to morphology and lexicology here, right? And what does that involve? Connected speech processes, right? Connected speech processes, are very likely to be present, right? Are very likely to be used in informal, spoken or written transcripts or texts. Doesn't really matter. And what could that indicate? Now link it to identity, right? What about someone's identity might make them want to use certain blends, collocations, suffixations, or shortenings, right? These are huge features, or initialisms, or acronyms, right? Low-hanging fruit, but highly nuanced if you treat it as such. Very, very important. Or if we go kind of back to this phonology area, like, what about phonological patterning, right? Think about it. If there's rhymes or rhythm or alliteration, you cannot miss it. You just cannot miss it. And how do we talk about it? They reinforce memorability. They draw the audience's attention, right? So it's very, very important. It's kind of like if you're a doctor and patients come into the hospital, these are things that you can't miss. Imagine the patient is the transcript and you are the doctor. You cannot miss these prosodic features, right? It's just so pivotal. It's critical because they are so obvious and they're likely salient and very salient. So you better talk about it and you better know how to talk about it, right? Which is what I'm trying to help you with in this video. Now, imagine, right? Just imagine briefly when it comes to, morphology and lexicology, right? Every single text or transcript ever has word classes, right? So maybe there's a salient adverb or adjective, right? Or salient adverbial phrase, or salient adjectival phrase, or salient proper noun phrase, capitalized intentionally if written, right? Etc. Right? So really, we're dealing with spoken informal ACs. So we're not dealing with written and writing yet. We're going to go through that very soon, next in a few minutes. But, it's good to think about these things, right? Now, let's move towards syntax and think to ourselves, well, every single transcript ever has sentence types, sentence structures, right? So declarative, imperative, exclamative, interrogative, and also our subject, verb, object, complement adverbial sentence structures, right? So know how to talk about them. Describe the way conjunctions and adverbials can balance different ideas, right? So imagine if your informal transcript suddenly / briefly use the formal feature of nominalization, right? Which what? Temporarily increases register toward formality, and it's a contrast now for you to discuss when it comes to register. So look for outliers or anomalies when it comes to register, right? Like passive voice is very intentional. So it is highly salient, right? People that use passive voice suddenly in informal settings or transcripts, wow, must have a reason to do so. So you cannot miss it. You cannot not talk about it, right? Or if you spot listing for lexical efficiency, right? Or parallelism, you better discuss it. You cannot miss it, right? Or now if we move kind of towards discourse, right? And I'll actually categorize this. So from here downwards, these are all kind of like phatic ideas. Phonetics and phonology type ideas, right? Phonetics and phonology, must-finds, I like to call it, right? And I'll just highlight that. And here are our morphology and lexicology must-finds, and I'll highlight that. And then a little bit further down here, we have our syntax must-finds, which I'll highlight like so. A little further down, we have our discourse must-finds, like so. And what might that include? Well, think about it, right? If it's spoken, there won't be coherence or cohesion as such. Instead, you will have a plethora of spoken discourse features and strategies to discuss, right? So, think about it. You can talk about adjacency pairs, right? Which contribute to cooperative turn-taking, floor management, and topic management / minimal response, which are all individual strategies in and of themselves, right? You can have discourse particles, repetitions, conventional or unconventional openings, right? You cannot miss these. Discuss them. Important, right? Now, further to that, let's go to our semantics category, right? For spoken texts, right? If there is a single metaphor, you cannot miss it. If there is a simile, personification, puns, irony, right? Euphemisms or dysphemisms, discuss them, right? Link them to the 6 functions. Link them to purposes. Link them to cultural context and why it might be relevant to use that in the Australian setting, right? Don't forget. Now, let's move towards features that you are almost guaranteed to find in an informal written AC, okay? So again, let's start with phonetics and phonology. Well, surprise, if it's written, there will be no prosodic features whatsoever, right? But if it's informal written, maybe, just maybe, there will be writing that imitates the spoken mode, that imitates or mimics the spoken mode. Now, how do we think about this, right? This could be through non-standard spelling and capitalization to indicate an increase in volume or speed / emotions and excitement, right? It could be through emojis, emoticons, or colloquialisms, right? Very important. Or sentence fragments, very important. And so really, how do you make sure your text doesn't sound dead? Imagine if it's a sequence of messages between two people, right? They'll imitate the spoken mode by making sure their texts don't sound dead. Like, we don't want our texts to be dead haps, right? So we want to convey feelings and emotions through our writing, right? And what might that be? Something with an emotive function, right? Now, keep in mind that every single transcript ever has word classes. So now look, we're moving to morphology and lexicology, right? Again, every single transcript ever has word classes. Now, in the same way, right? Any acronym, initialism, blend, shortening, you must know how to talk about it. Has to be. You cannot miss that. Now, if we move a little bit further through to syntax, which actually, let me come back up here and also indicate when I talk about when I talk about sentence structures and subject, verb, object, I'm really here talking about simple, compound, complex sentence structures, right? And let's add fragment in there too, right? Which are important. You need to know how to talk about those things. Now, when it comes to syntax, right? Again, imagine if this informal spoken transcript briefly used the formal feature of nominalization. That temporarily increases register towards formality. It's a contrast for you to discuss. So it goes without saying, again, any passive voice must be discussed as if it's a salient and intentional feature. It's passive, for God's sake. It's something that is intentional. It is so, to be passive aggressive, you have to make the choice to be passive aggressive, right? That's what I'm trying to communicate there. Now, if you spot listening for lexical efficiency or parallelism, you better discuss it, right? Now, let's go to discourse, right? Now, here, there are no spoken discourse features or strategies to discuss. Instead, we have a plethora of coherence and cohesion, which we love, don't we? So think about it, right? When it comes to coherence and cohesion, right, is there any rationale to the order of the text, right? And what does that indicate? Logical ordering. That's a feature of coherence. Now, is there any change in color, font, bolding, underlines, italics, font size, right? Formatting, right? Look at it. And then ask yourself, does this text at all abide by any conventions? Right? It could be an article, could be an informal article, but still strategically structured to meet the consistency and conventions of an article with, the author's name on line 3, strategically aligned with the right margin. So describe what it is visually. Now, ask yourself, is there any inference at play here? Is the author relying on any pre-existing knowledge to fill the gaps, right? This can ease clarity, increase ease of understanding, and thus coherence, right? That's important. And what about cohesion? Well, when it comes to cohesion, repetition is by far the easiest to discuss. All you have to say is it reinforces the key ideas of, then tell me what that key idea is. Tell me that it creates cohesive ties across the text, right? And if you see any sort of commas, front focus, end focus, any conjunction at all can be discussed, used to balance and give priority / prominence to different ideas across different clauses in various sentence structures, like complex or compound complex, right? There's levels to this, okay? Then finally, what do we have, right? Semantics, right? Again, exact same. If there is a single metaphor, you cannot miss it. If there are similes, personifications, puns, irony, euphemism, you cannot miss it. Make sure you discuss the identities of the interlocutors in your writing, how their language reflects their intrinsic and extrinsic identities. So, really to round it off, that's a wrap for this video tutorial. And if you liked it, please hit the like button, please subscribe. If you have any follow-up questions or future video requests, pop them through. We've got a heap of our resources on the student portal, over 100 video guides, our own textbook, a raw 50 masterclasses. All of our students get over 10 hours of access to live lessons every single week under the same subscription price. You can have a free trial with us. Let us know and we can help you out. But I hope this was helpful.